The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the marble floors of the Hartwell mansion in the exclusive hills of Beverly Hills. Tonight, the estate that had stood as a symbol of American entrepreneurial success for 3 generations was hosting what many considered the social event of the season, the engagement party of Richard Hartwell III and his fiancée, Victoria Sterling. Richard, at 35, had inherited not only his family's vast fortune built on tech innovations and real estate investments, but also their legendary sense of responsibility toward those who worked for them. His salt and pepper hair, a premature gift from the stress of managing a multi-billion-dollar empire, only added to his distinguished appearance as he moved through the crowd of Los Angeles elite, shaking hands and accepting congratulations. Victoria Sterling, draped in a designer gown that cost more than most people's annual salary, smiled her practiced smile while internally cataloguing every detail of the evening. At 28, she had climbed the social ladder with the precision of a military strategist, and this engagement represented the culmination of years of careful planning. Her blonde hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, revealing diamond earrings that caught the light with every turn of her head. In the kitchen, Sarah Mitchell worked with the quiet efficiency that had made her indispensable to the Hartwell family for the past 15 years. At 33, she possessed an understated beauty that no amount of expensive clothing could manufacture, the kind that came from genuine warmth and inner strength. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her chef's whites were immaculate, despite the controlled chaos of preparing appetizers for 200 guests. Sarah had arrived at the Hartwell estate as a young culinary school graduate, recommended by a professor who knew Eleanor Hartwell, Richard's mother. What had started as a temporary position had evolved into something much more significant, though few understood the true depth of her connection to the family. "The shrimp canapes are ready for the second serving," announced Maria, one of the EI serving staff as she balanced a silver tray with practiced ease. Sarah nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "Remember, the ones with the caviar go to the VIP section first. Mrs. Sterling specifically requested them for her friends from the country club." As the evening progressed, Sarah could hear the laughter and conversation flowing from the main ballroom. She had orchestrated countless events for the Hartwell family, but tonight felt different. There was an undercurrent of tension she couldn't quite identify, a feeling that had been building ever since the engagement announcement 6 months ago. Eleanor Hartwell, the family matriarch at 68, moved through the party with the grace of someone who had spent decades in high society. Her silver hair was styled in an elegant bob, and her navy blue gown spoke of timeless sophistication rather than trendy fashion. She had built this social empire alongside her late husband, Robert Hartwell, and now watched over it with the protective instincts of a lioness. Throughout the evening, Eleanor's eyes kept drifting toward the kitchen entrance, her expression clouded with concerns that went far deeper than the success of tonight's celebration. She had tried to discuss her reservations about Victoria with Richard, but her son was blinded by what he believed was love. The trouble began just after 9 o'clock, when Victoria decided to make an impromptu inspection of the kitchen. She swept in with 2 of her closest friends, Jennifer Caldwell and Patricia Morrison, both wives of prominent Los Angeles businessmen and known for their sharp tongues and sharper judgments. "I simply must see where all this delicious food is coming from," Victoria announced, her voice carrying that particular tone of condescension that wealthy people often used when addressing service staff. Sarah looked up from where she was plating the final round of appetizers, her hands steady despite the unexpected intrusion. "Good evening, Miss Sterling. I hope you're enjoying the party." Victoria's eyes swept across the kitchen with the calculating gaze of someone looking for flaws. "The presentation is adequate, I suppose, though I did notice the lamb tenderloin. I was slightly overcooked at table 12. Sarah felt her jaw tighten slightly. She had personally tasted every piece of lamb that left the kitchen, and each one had been perfectly medium rare. "I'm sorry you feel that way. If you'd like, I can prepare a fresh portion." "Oh, don't bother," Victoria waved dismissively. "I suppose we can't expect miracles from someone with such limited experience in high-end catering." The kitchen fell silent. Even the usual clatter of dishes and sizzle of pans seemed to pause as everyone absorbed the insult. Sarah's sous chef, Michael, looked up from his station with barely concealed anger, while the serving staff exchanged uncomfortable glances. "I mean," Victoria continued, warming to her theme as her friends giggled behind her, "it's charming that Richard keeps you around. Really, such loyalty to the help is admirable, even when the skills don't quite match the ambition." Sarah's hands stilled on the plate she was holding. In 15 years of working for the Hartwell family, she had never been spoken to with such open disrespect. Her throat tightened, but she maintained her composure, drawing on reserves of dignity that ran deeper than any insult could reach. "I've been with the Hartwell family for 15 years, Sarah said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning within her. "I take pride in my work and in serving this family." Victoria's laugh was like broken glass. 15 years, my goodness, you certainly have staying power. Though I suppose when you don't have many other options, you make do with what you can get. The cruel words hung in the air like poison. Sarah felt the familiar burn of tears threatening, but she refused to give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and met Victoria's gaze directly. It was at that moment that Richard appeared in the kitchen doorway, having come to personally thank Sarah for the exceptional work, as was his custom at every event. He had been raised to show appreciation for those who made his family's life possible, a value instilled by both his parents. The scene that greeted him stopped him cold. Victoria stood in the center of his kitchen like a queen holding court, while Sarah, who had been like family to him for 15 years, stood with her head held high, but her eyes reflecting a hurt so deep it made his chest tighten with anger. "What's going on here?" Richard's voice cut through the tension like a blade, causing Victoria to turn with a start. "Oh, darling." Victoria's demeanor shifted instantly, her voice taking on a honeyed tone. "I was just complimenting your chef on her efforts tonight." But Richard had heard enough from the doorway to understand exactly what had transpired. His jaw set in a line that those who knew him well recognized as dangerous. This was the same expression he wore in boardroom negotiations when someone tried to take advantage of his family's business. "Sarah," he said, his voice gentle but carrying across the now silent kitchen, "could you give us a moment?" Sarah nodded, grateful for the opportunity to escape, but Richard's next words stopped her. "Actually, no, stay. I think Victoria has something she'd like to say to you." The kitchen seemed to hold its breath. Victoria's face flushed red, caught between embarrassment and indignation. Her friends shifted uncomfortably, suddenly finding their shoes fascinating. "Richard, I don't think," Victoria began. "I think you do," Richard interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Sarah has been an integral part of this family long before you entered the picture. She deserves your respect, not your condescension." Victoria's mask of civility began to crack. "I was simply making conversation." "You were being cruel," Richard stated flatly, "and that is something I will not tolerate in my home, toward my family, or toward anyone else." The word family hung in the air with particular weight, causing Eleanor, who had quietly appeared behind Richard, to draw in a sharp breath. Her eyes met Sarah's across the kitchen, filled with a mixture of pride and something else, something that looked almost like fear. Victoria's composure finally shattered completely. "Are your family? She's the help, Richard. She's not your family, she's an employee." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's expression grew so cold that even Victoria took a step back. "Get out," he said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my kitchen, get out of my house. The engagement party is over." Victoria's face went white, then red, then white again. "You can't be serious. All these people, our friends will understand that I don't tolerate disrespect in my home," Richard said, his voice rising slightly. "Leave. Now." With a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob, Victoria fled from the kitchen, her friends trailing behind her like confused sheep. The sound of her heels clicking rapidly across the marble floors echoed through the mansion. Eleanor moved to Sarah's side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right, dear?" Sarah nodded, though her hands were trembling slightly. "I'm fine, Mrs. Hartwell, thank you." Richard ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking older than his 35 years. "Sarah, I'm so sorry, that was completely unacceptable." "You don't need to apologize for her," Sarah said softly, "but thank you for standing up for me." Richard looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're family, Sarah. You've always been family." Eleanor's grip on Sarah's shoulder tightened almost imperceptibly, and when Sarah looked up at her, she saw something in the older woman's eyes that made her heart skip a beat. It was a look of recognition, of shared understanding, of secrets long buried that threatened to surface. The kitchen staff, who had witnessed the entire exchange, began to move with renewed purpose, as though the confrontation had somehow freed them from invisible chains. Michael, the sous chef, approached Richard with uncharacteristic boldness. "Sir, if I may say so, you did the right thing. Miss Sarah has always treated everyone with respect. She didn't deserve that." Richard nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that." As the evening wound down and the guests gradually departed, many of them whispering about the dramatic exit of the bride-to-be, Sarah found herself alone in the kitchen with Eleanor. The older woman sat at the small table where the staff usually took their breaks, looking suddenly fragile despite her usual commanding presence. "Mrs. Hartwell, you should go rest. It's been a long evening." Eleanor looked up at her with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "Sarah, dear, we need to talk. There are things I should have told you long ago." Something in Eleanor's tone made Sarah's pulse quicken. She pulled out a chair and sat across from the woman who had been her employer, her mentor, and in many ways her surrogate mother for 15 years. "What is it?" Eleanor's hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as she reached across the table to take Sarah's. "Your father, Sarah. I think it's time you knew the truth about your father." The kitchen clock ticked past midnight as Eleanor Hartwell's words hung in the air like a revelation waiting to be born. Sarah felt her heart hammering against her ribs, each beat echoing the questions that had haunted her entire life. She had grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until she aged out of the system at 18, always wondering about the parents who had given her up. "My father?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Hartwell, I don't understand. You knew my father?" Eleanor's eyes glistened with unshed tears, decades of carefully guarded secrets threatening to spill over. She had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in her mind, but now, faced with Sarah's trusting gaze, the words seemed inadequate. "Your father was Robert Hartwell, my husband, Richard's father." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She felt the room spinning, her carefully ordered world tilting on its axis. "That's impossible. That can't be true." "It is true, my dear child." Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. "You are Robert's daughter. You are a Hartwell." Sarah stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the marble floor. No, that's not. I would have known. Someone would have told me." "Robert and I agreed to keep it secret," Eleanor continued, her voice heavy with the weight of old decisions. "He had a brief relationship before our marriage with a young woman named Catherine Mitchell. When Catherine became pregnant, she was afraid of the scandal it would cause. The Hartwells were already prominent in business circles, and an illegitimate child would have destroyed both their reputations." Sarah's hand flew to her throat, touching the simple gold locket she had worn since childhood, the only thing left from her birth mother. "Catherine Mitchell was my mother's name, but she passed away when I was born." "Yes," Eleanor nodded sadly. "Complications during childbirth? Robert was devastated. He wanted to claim you immediately, but Catherine's family, your maternal grandparents, they were proud people. They refused his help, said they would raise you themselves." The pieces of Sarah's fractured childhood began to fall into place like a painful puzzle. "But they didn't raise me. I went into foster care when I was 5. Eleanor's face crumpled with grief. "Your grandparents passed away in a car accident. Robert searched for you, hired private investigators, but you had been placed in the system under your mother's maiden name. By the time he found you, you were already settled with a family, and the social worker advised against disrupting your life again. Sarah sank back into her chair, overwhelmed. So he just watched me from a distance. He never stopped watching over you, Eleanor said firmly. Who do you think paid for your culinary school tuition? Who made sure you got that recommendation? Letter that brought you here? The room seemed to tilt again. Professor Henderson said he knew you from charity work. Professor Henderson was telling the truth, but it was Robert who asked me to help. When you graduated, Robert made sure. You heard about the opening here. He wanted you close, wanted to be part of your life even if he couldn't tell you the truth. Sarah's mind raced through 15 years of memories, seeing them all in a new light. Robert Hartwell's kindness to her, the way he had always taken time to ask about her day, the generous Christmas bonuses that had allowed her to save, money, the gentle encouragement when she had doubted her abilities. Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't you tell me after he passed? Eleanor's voice broke slightly. Robert made me promise to wait until you were ready, until the time was right. He was afraid that knowing the truth might make you feel obligated to stay, that it would change the genuine relationship you had built with our family. He wanted you to choose to be here because you wanted to be, not because of blood. And now? Why are you telling me now? Eleanor looked toward the doorway where Richard had stood defending Sarah hours earlier. Because tonight showed me that you already are family in every way that matters. Richard's reaction, the way he protected you, he feels it too, even if he doesn't understand why. You're his sister, Sarah, his half-sister. The word sister reverberated through Sarah's consciousness. Richard, the man she had admired and respected for years, the employer who had become something like a protective older brother, he truly was her brother. Does Richard know? No, Eleanor shook her head. Robert made me promise that Richard would never know unless you decided to tell him yourself. He didn't want Richard to feel burdened by a secret that wasn't his to bear. Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens that had been her sanctuary during difficult times. Everything she thought she knew about her life had been rewritten in the span of an hour. There's something else, Eleanor said softly. Something you need to know about your inheritance. Sarah turned, surprised. Inheritance? Robert left provisions in his will, a trust fund that has been growing for years, waiting for the day when you learned the truth, and... Eleanor hesitated, to her controlling share of Hartwell Industries. Sarah felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. What? Robert always intended for his children to inherit the company equally. The will states that upon revelation of your parentage and your acceptance of your heritage, you would become an equal partner with Richard in running Hartwell Industries. The implications were staggering. Hartwell Industries was worth billions, employing thousands of people across multiple sectors. Sarah, who had spent her entire adult life in service to others, was suddenly faced with the possibility of being one of the most powerful business owners in the country. I can't. This is too much. I need time to think. Eleanor rose and crossed, to her placing gentle hands on Sarah's shoulders. Of course, dear, this is overwhelming, I know. But I want you to understand something. You have earned every bit of respect and love this family has for you. Not because of your blood, but because of who you are. As if summoned by their conversation, Richard appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened and his formal jacket discarded. He looked exhausted but concerned. I saw the lights still on. Is everything all right? Sarah and Eleanor exchanged glances. The weight of the secret sat between them like a living thing. We were just talking about tonight, Eleanor said carefully, about what happened with Victoria. Richard's expression darkened. I owe you another apology, Sarah. Victoria's behavior was inexcusable. I should have seen this side of her before tonight. Richard, Sarah began, then stopped. How could she tell him that his entire understanding of his family was about to change? What Victoria said about you not having other options, that was cruel and wrong, Richard continued. You could work anywhere, for anyone. The fact that you've chosen to stay with us, to be part of our family, means everything. Eleanor, made a small sound, almost like a sob, which made Richard look at her with concern. "Mother, what's wrong?" "Nothing, dear, just tonight has been emotional for all of us." Richard studied both women, sensing undercurrents he couldn't quite identify. "Sarah, I want you to know that what I said earlier about you being family, I meant every word. You're not just an employee to us, you never have been." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke Sarah's composure. Here was her brother, unknowingly welcoming her into a family she had always belonged to. "Thank you," she managed. "That means more to me than you know." Richard smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him all evening. "Good. Because after tonight, I think we all need to remember what's really important." After Richard left to check on the final cleanup from the party, Eleanor and Sarah sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. "What happens now?" Sarah finally asked. "Now, you decide what you want to do with this information. You can take time to process it, to decide if and when you want to claim your birthright. But Sarah, whatever you choose, know that you are loved and wanted in this family." Sarah touched her locket again, thinking of the mother she never knew and the father who had watched over her from afar. "I need to see his will. I need to understand exactly what he intended." Eleanor nodded. "Of course. Tomorrow, if you're ready, we can meet with the family attorney. James Morrison has been handling the Hartwell estate for 30 years. He can explain everything." As they finally prepared to leave the kitchen, Sarah had one more question. "Mrs. Hartwell, Eleanor, what would Robert have wanted me to do?" Eleanor paused at the doorway, her expression soft with memory. "He would have wanted you to follow your heart, dear, just as you always have." Left alone in the kitchen that had been her domain for 15 years, Sarah looked around with new eyes. Tomorrow, everything would change. She would learn about trusts and inheritance, about business empires and family legacies. But tonight, she was still Sarah Mitchell, the girl who had grown up in foster care and found her true home in service to others. Whatever tomorrow brought, she knew one thing with certainty. The family she had chosen her right back, long before any of them understood the deeper truth that bound them together. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of James Morrison's law office in downtown Los Angeles, casting long shadows across the mahogany conference table where Sarah sat, still trying to process the reality of her situation. Across from her, Eleanor held her hand reassuringly, while the family attorney, a distinguished man in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, spread documents across the polished surface. "Miss Mitchell," James began, his voice gentle but professional, "what I'm about to show you will fundamentally change your understanding of your position in the world. Are you ready?" Sarah nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. She had barely slept, spending the night walking through the mansion's gardens, trying to reconcile the woman she had been yesterday with the heiress she apparently was today. James opened a thick folder and withdrew a document bearing official seals. "This is your father's last will and testament, specifically the codicil he added 3 years before his passing. He had hoped to tell you the truth himself, but time ran out," Sarah finished softly. "Indeed. According to this document, you're entitled to 40% of Hartwell Industries, with Richard maintaining 40% and Eleanor retaining 20%. Additionally, there's a trust fund that has been accumulating interest for over 30 years. The numbers James quoted made Sarah's head spin. The trust fund alone contained more money than she could have earned in several lifetimes. The business stake represented a responsibility she had never imagined possible. "There's more," James continued, turning to another document. "Your father also left you the summer house in Napa Valley, along with several investment properties. But perhaps, most importantly, he left you this." He handed her a sealed envelope with her name written in handwriting she recognized from years of seeing Robert Hartwell's notes around the house. With shaking fingers, Sarah broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Robert's familiar handwriting blurred as tears filled her eyes. "My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, then Eleanor has finally found the courage to tell you what I never could. I hope you can forgive an old man's cowardice. I wanted so many times to tell you that you are my daughter, that every day you spent in this house was a gift to me. I watched you grow from a determined young woman into someone extraordinary. Your kindness, your strength, your ability to bring joy to others. These gifts came from your mother, Catherine, who was the most beautiful soul I ever knew before Eleanor. You owe me nothing. Sarah, nothing. The inheritance is yours by right, but more than that, you have earned your place in this family through your own merit. Whether you choose to claim your heritage or not, know that you have been loved every single day of your life. Be happy, my daughter. That is all I ever wanted for you. With all my love, Robert Hartwell. Sarah clutched the letter to her chest, finally allowing the tears to fall freely. Eleanor moved to embrace her, and for several minutes, the law office was filled only with the sound of quiet weeping and gentle comfort. Take all the time you need, James said softly. These decisions don't have to be made today. But even as Sarah wept, her mind was racing. The implications of her inheritance went far beyond personal wealth. Hartwell Industries employed 15,000 people. The company's decisions affected communities across the country. If she accepted her father's legacy, she would be responsible for all of it. What happens if I refuse? She asked, her voice hoarse. The inheritance would revert to Richard, along with the business responsibilities, James explained. Though I should mention, your father anticipated this possibility. He included a provision that if you choose not to claim your inheritance, a significant portion would go to establishing a foundation for children in foster care. Even in consideration of her refusal, Robert had thought of others who shared her background. Sarah felt a fresh wave of love for the father she was only now truly getting to know. The meeting concluded with Sarah requesting time to consider her options. As they prepared to leave, James had one final piece of information. Miss Mitchell, there's something else you should know. News of your engagement party incident last night has already reached certain social circles. Miss Sterling has been vocal about her treatment. Eleanor's expression hardened. What has she been saying? Nothing actionable legally, but she's been spreading rumors about Miss Mitchell's relationship with the family, some rather unpleasant speculation about her motives and character. Sarah felt a familiar knot form in her stomach, even after. Learning the truth about her heritage, Victoria's cruelty could still wound her. It doesn't matter what she says, Eleanor said firmly. People who know Sarah will never believe such nonsense. But as they drove back to the mansion, Sarah wondered if it would matter what people believed. Her entire life was about to change, and she wasn't sure she was ready for the scrutiny that would come with being a Hartwell heiress. Richard was waiting for them in the library when they returned, pacing restlessly among the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. He looked haggard, as though he too had spent a sleepless night processing the events of the engagement party. How did it go? He asked, his concern evident. Eleanor and Sarah exchanged glances. The moment of truth had arrived, literally. Richard, please sit down, Eleanor said gently. We have something important to tell you. Over the next hour, Eleanor carefully revealed the truth about Sarah's parentage, watching her son's face cycle through disbelief, shock, understanding, and finally, a complex mixture of emotions she couldn't quite read. Sarah is my sister, Richard said finally, his voice filled with wonder. My half-sister. Yes, Eleanor confirmed. Richard stood and walked to the window, staring out at the grounds where he and Sarah had shared countless conversations over the years. It makes sense now. The way Dad always talked about you, the special attention, the way he lit up when you were around. He turned back to Sarah, who sat rigidly in her chair, terrified of his reaction. Are you angry? She asked quietly. Richard's response surprised them both. He laughed, not with humor, but with something approaching relief. Angry? Sarah, I'm thrilled. Do you know how many times over the years I've wished I had a sibling? Someone who understood what it meant to carry the Hartwell name, the responsibility, the pressure. He crossed to her and took her hands. I've felt that connection with you for years without understanding why. Now I know. Sarah felt a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying lift from her shoulders. So you're not upset about the inheritance? About sharing the company? Upset? Richard shook his head. Sarah, I've been carrying the weight of this empire alone since Dad passed. The idea of sharing that responsibility with someone I trust completely, someone who loves this family as much as I do, it's a gift. Their moment of connection was interrupted by the sharp ring of the telephone. Eleanor answered, her expression growing increasingly troubled as she listened. I see. Yes, I understand. Thank you for calling. She hung up and turned to them with a grim expression. That was Margaret Whitman from the charity board. Victoria has been calling people all morning, spreading stories about Sarah. She's claiming that Sarah has been manipulating our family for years, that she has some kind of hold over us. Richard's face darkened with anger. She's trying to destroy Sarah's reputation before the truth comes out. What truth? Sarah asked, confused. Eleanor and Richard exchanged glances. Sarah, dear, when you accept your inheritance, if you accept it, it will have to be made public. There will be legal filings, board announcements, media attention. The business world will want to know about the new Hartwell heiress. The reality of her situation began to sink in fully. If she claimed her birthright, she would be thrust into a spotlight she had never sought, with Victoria already working to poison public opinion against her. Maybe I should refuse, Sarah said quietly. Maybe it would be better for everyone if I just stayed as I am. No, Richard said firmly. Sarah, you can't let Victoria's vindictiveness steal your heritage from you. Dad wanted you to have this. You deserve this. But the scandal, the attention, will pass, Eleanor interjected. Sarah, this family has weathered scandals before. We'll weather this one too, together. Sarah looked at these two people who had been her family long before she knew they truly were her family. In their faces, she saw not just love and support, but a fierce protectiveness that gave her strength. There's something else, Richard said suddenly. Something I should tell you both. I've been thinking about ending my engagement to Victoria. Anyway, last night wasn't the first time she's shown this side of herself. It was just the first time she did it so publicly. Eleanor looked relieved. Richard, I've been hoping you would come to that conclusion. She's not right for you, dear. No, she's not. And after seeing how she treated Sarah, how she treated my sister, I know I could never marry someone capable of such cruelty. The word sister sent a warm glow through Sarah's chest. For the first time since learning the truth, she felt truly hopeful about the future. I need some time to think about everything, Sarah said, but whatever I decide about the inheritance, I want you both to know, this family, this home, it's been everything to me. That won't change. Richard smiled. It won't change for us either, sister. As the afternoon wore on, the three of them began to plan for the challenges ahead. Victoria's rumors would need to be addressed, the business implications considered, and eventually, if Sarah chose to accept her inheritance, the public revelation managed. But underneath all the practical concerns, there was something else growing, a sense of completion, as though a puzzle that had been missing pieces for 33 years was finally becoming whole. 3 months had passed since the night that changed everything. The autumn air in Beverly Hills carried the scent of change, and nowhere was that change more evident than in the transformed dynamics of the Hartwell family. Sarah stood in the executive boardroom of Hartwell Industries, looking out at the Los Angeles skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. In her tailored navy suit, she looked every inch the business executive she had never imagined becoming. But the real transformation wasn't in her appearance, it was in the confidence that radiated from her as she prepared for the most important board meeting of her life. Ready for this? Richard asked, entering the boardroom with 2 cups of coffee. The past months had brought them closer than ever, their sibling bond strengthening as they learned to work together as partners. As ready as I'll ever be, Sarah replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Today, she would formally accept her position as co-CEO of Hartwell Industries, a decision that had taken weeks of careful consideration and planning. The intervening months had been challenging, but ultimately rewarding. Victoria's campaign of rumors had briefly made headlines in the society pages, but truth had a way of surfacing. When the story of Sarah's parentage was officially announced, it was accompanied by testimonials from longtime family friends, employees, and business associates who spoke of her character and capabilities. Victoria herself had disappeared from Los Angeles society, reportedly moving to New York after her attempts to damage Sarah's reputation backfired spectacularly. The revelation that she had been cruel to a woman who turned out to be a Hartwell heiress made her the subject of ridicule rather than sympathy. "The board members are arriving," Eleanor announced, entering the boardroom with the grace and authority that had made her a force in Los Angeles society for decades. At 70, she showed no signs of slowing down, and the revelation about Sarah had seemed to energize her rather than burden her. As the board members filed in, seasoned executives, longtime family advisors and industry leaders, Sarah felt a familiar flutter of nerves. But this time the nervousness was accompanied by something new, excitement about the future. James Morrison, now serving as both family attorney and board secretary, called the meeting to order. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to formally welcome Sarah Hartwell Mitchell as co-CEO of Hartwell Industries, alongside Richard Hartwell III. The name change had been Sarah's idea. She wanted to honor both her birth father and the mother who had given her life, even if she had never known her. Before we proceed with the formal vote," Richard said, standing to address the board, "I'd like to say something about my sister and soon-to-be partner." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion as Richard continued. "Many of you have known Sarah for years as our head chef, and you've seen her dedication, her integrity, and her ability to bring people together. What you might not know is that, over the past 3 months, she has demonstrated the same qualities in learning about our business operations, our corporate responsibilities, and our family's vision for the future." Eleanor nodded approvingly. Sarah had insisted on starting from the ground up, spending time in every department, learning not just the executive decisions, but understanding how those decisions affected every employee. "Sarah brings something to this company that we've been missing," Richard continued. "A perspective that comes from understanding what it means to work your way up to earn every opportunity and to never forget where you came from." The board vote was unanimous. As Sarah signed the documents that would make her one of the most powerful businesswomen in the country, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, from foster care to culinary school to the Hartwell kitchen and now to the executive suite. But the most meaningful moment came after the meeting, when she returned to the mansion's kitchen for the first time since her transformation. The staff greeted her with a mixture of pride and genuine affection that money couldn't buy. Ms. Hartwell," Michael, her former sous chef, corrected himself with a grin. "It's still Sarah," she said firmly. "That will never change." The kitchen had been her sanctuary for 15 years, and she wasn't about to let corporate titles change the relationships that mattered most to her. That evening, the family gathered in the mansion's main dining room for a celebration dinner, but this time Sarah sat at the head of the table as an equal member of the family, rather than the person who had prepared the meal. "I have something to tell you both," Sarah announced as they finished their dessert. "Thank you, Messa. I've been working on a project, something that I think Dad would have approved of." Eleanor and Richard leaned forward with interest. "I'm opening a culinary institute," Sarah continued, "a place where young people from backgrounds like mine, foster kids who've aged out of the system, can learn professional cooking skills and get the support they need to build careers in the hospitality industry." Richard's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Sarah, that's brilliant. The company can provide funding." "Actually," Sarah interrupted with a smile, "I'm funding it myself. From my inheritance, I want to call it the Catherine Mitchell Culinary Institute after my birth mother." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, my dear girl, your father would be so proud." "There's more," Sarah said. "I want to build it in downtown Los Angeles, in a neighborhood that needs economic development. And I want to include a restaurant, a place where our graduates can get real experience while serving the community." The conversation continued late into the night, with Richard and Eleanor offering their full support for Sarah's vision. As they planned and dreamed together, Sarah realized that she had found her true calling, not just as a businesswoman, but as someone who could use her unexpected fortune to change lives. 6 months later, the Catherine Mitchell Culinary Institute held its grand opening. The converted warehouse in downtown Los Angeles buzzed with activity as students, faculty, community leaders, and media representatives gathered to celebrate. Sarah, now comfortable in her dual role as business executive and philanthropist, addressed the crowd with the poise of someone who had truly found her place in the world. "This institute represents more than just culinary education," she said, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium. "It represents the belief that every person, regardless of their background, deserves the opportunity to pursue their dreams and build a meaningful life." In the audience, Eleanor and Richard beamed with pride. Eleanor had often said that Robert's greatest legacy wasn't the business empire he had built, but the values he had instilled in his children. Today, those values were on full display. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Sarah found herself alone in the Institute's demonstration kitchen. The gleaming equipment and orderly stations reminded her of the Hartwell Mansion kitchen where she had discovered her true family. But this space represented something new, a future she was creating not just for herself, but for others who needed the same opportunities she had been given. A soft knock on the doorframe made her turn. Richard stood there with 2 cups of coffee, a habit he had developed during their months of working together. "Thinking about Dad?" he asked, joining her at the central prep station. "Always," Sarah replied. "Do you think he would approve of all this?" Richard looked around the state-of-the-art facility, then at his sister, confident, purposeful, and radiant with the joy of meaningful work. "I think he's probably bursting with pride," Richard said. "You've taken everything he gave you and multiplied it into something beautiful." As they stood together in the quiet kitchen, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from a humiliating encounter with a cruel fiancé to discovering her true heritage, from kitchen staff to corporate executive, from alone in the world to surrounded by family and purpose. The story of her transformation wasn't just about inheritance or business success, it was about the power of love, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the way that families can be formed through choice as much as through blood. Outside, the lights of Los Angeles twinkled, like possibilities stretching to the horizon. Sarah Hartwell Mitchell had found her place in the world, not because of the name she carried or the fortune she had inherited, but because of the woman she had chosen to become. And in the quiet of the kitchen where her new chapter was beginning, surrounded by the tools that would help others build their own dreams, she knew that the best stories were just getting started. Femme da Historia. Dear listeners, we hope Sarah's incredible journey from kitchen to boardroom, from employee to heiress, has touched your hearts as much as it touched ours. This story of hidden family bonds, unexpected inheritance, and the courage to stand up against cruelty reminds us that our true worth isn't determined by our circumstances, but by how we choose to treat others and use the opportunities we're given. If you were moved by Sarah and Richard's story of sibling love, Eleanor's protective wisdom, and the triumph of justice over jealousy, you'll find more captivating tales in our special playlist. Click to your left to discover stories that explore the beautiful complexity of family secrets, second chances, and the power of love to transform lives. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Every day we bring you unique narratives about real people facing extraordinary circumstances, finding strength in unexpected places, and discovering that family is often found in the most surprising ways. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear which moment touched you most. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these powerful stories to life. Until next time, remember that every ending is just a new beginning waiting to unfold.